Good Wednesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope your afternoon is going well. Senior Bowl continues out in Mobile, Alabama. Day 2 of practices leading up to this weekend's game. Andrew Berry met with some of the Browns beat reporters who are covering the Senior Bowl in Mobile, and this comes out. Was asked about this, if Dion Sanders would allow his son Shedeur to play for the Browns. There's been all that talk that Dion might steer Shedeur away from the Browns, kind of like Eli Manning and Archie Manning did a few years back. Andrew Berry said, "I don't anticipate that being a problem," to several of the beat reporters at Senior Bowl. Also said that the Browns meeting with Shedeur at the East-West Shrine game, which is going to happen near Dallas on Friday, went really well. Titans #1, Giants #3 also met with him there. Berry said Shedeur's an impressive young man, poised, calm, smart. You can tell that he's been raised, quite honestly, by a Hall of Fame dad. We're going to get to know him even more over the course of this process, but he's really impressive. Important to note, 2 things. Great that Andrew Berry feels that way, hasn't heard anything, but they're not going to hear anything relative to Dion not wanting his son to play here, at least until after the Combine, leading up closer to the draft. That's not the way this usually works when it's happened with either Elway or the Mannings. So, again, it's great that that hasn't happened. We wouldn't know about it right now at this point. Also, Andrew Berry on the reports that the Browns were the ones that asked Shedeur to opt out of the practices as well as the East-West Shrine game. He told the Browns beat reporters present, including Mary Kay Cabot, "I don't know where that report came from. It's not true. That's not a request we would make." With that being said, I want to be clear, whether he participated in the practice or not would have no bearing on what we thought of him, but I don't know where that report came from. More from Andrew Berry relative to what's going on with the Browns and the quarterback position from the Senior Bowl in Mobile. Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for cleveland.com, the Plain Dealer, posted an article earlier today. Berry is quoted as saying, "I think there are talented passers in this draft. I have a hard time believing there's not at least one guy that will be a quality starter in the league, if not more. I think a big part of it with these guys is really the environment and surrounding them in the right environment that allows us to maximize them. But yeah, I think there are talented passers in this class." Important to note, Jim Nagy, who runs the Senior Bowl, we had this yesterday, noted top quarterbacks in this class probably wouldn't be in the top 6 or 7 last year. Berry also noted that the Browns don't have to draft a quarterback at #2 just because they need one. Also said, doesn't know yet if the Browns starter in 2025 will be a rookie or a veteran, with the club poised to add at least 2 experienced passers via free agency or the trade market. So again, multiple guys, not sure if it's going to be a veteran or a rookie. Have to see how that all shakes out. They'll have a better understanding of that once, the free agency season signs and you find out what's happened with some of the veterans. Kevin Stefanski, also yesterday, Sirius NFL radio, was asked about the quarterback situation with the Browns.
He didn't do much very well, so we're looking at everything, and certainly, you talk about the quarterback position is important when it comes to winning and losing. We get that. We've had different guys that we've won with, so we believe in our system and that a system that's going to adapt to our best players, and certainly you're thinking about the quarterback position when it comes to that. But for us right now, it's about putting the system in with Tommy, Reese, and this offensive staff, and making sure that it's adaptable to whomever we got out there at all of those spots.
And again, likely that the Browns will sign, trade for a veteran, draft at least one. You could draft a guy early. You could draft a guy late. So there's going to be an infusion of quarterbacks on this roster that likely weren't here before. I mentioned today, day 2 in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl and practices. A couple of quarterbacks on the Browns' radar that have been linked to him, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart. Did not have a great day ones, kind of up and down. And really, day 2 of practice, more of the same for Milroe and Dart. This Jalen Milroe going to throw the deep ball, a little underthrown. Jack Besh though, goes up, makes a nice contested catch. Interesting Besha guy that on the wide receiver radar as well. This one, bobbled snap, pressure, and then Milroe, bad pass, gets intercepted. So up and down day for Milroe again today. Was better in the one-on-one drills. Here's a look at Jackson Dart, and he also was a little bit better. A little quick outlet pass to fullback, pretty good one. Nice catch by the fullback on that. It's kind of over the shoulder. This one shows a little bit of his arm strength, which is pretty good. Goes underneath, and fumble was late, so we cut that one out. And here's another one, little tunnel screen, and you saw arm angle and zip. So Jackson Dart, intriguing. Again, those are guys that won't go at 2, but that the Browns might look at if they trade back in the first round, if they're there in the second or third round. Milroe and Jackson Dart. In Milroe, just hasn't had the look of a polished quarterback. That you knew there was going to be some signs that you needed work. There are likely more of them through the first 2 days of practice. Cavs ended that losing streak when they beat Detroit earlier in the week. They head to Miami. They will face the Heat on the road, and Darius Garland ruled out for the game. It'll be a day of rest. So the Cavs are coming off of that win against the Pistons, and they will they'll be without Garland tonight in Miami. But so they beat the Pistons, and they held leading into that game. They had a defensive rating of 118.9 in the month of January. That was one of the worst in the league, bottom 5. For the Detroit game, they had a defensive rating of 95.8, significantly better. Kenny Anderson asked about the defense and that win against the Pistons.
These guys have a lot of pride in their defensive identity. And like I said, I saw our bigs really active. But yeah, you know how it is. You got to be able to win games in a lot of different ways. So we really haven't had one like this. It seemed like this where we just couldn't make a shot and really held them down. This is like an '80s game, and it's good to see we stuck with it and held them down. They play physical, playoff style basketball. So, like I said, it was good to see our guys respond in that environment, and didn't let the missed shots affect us at all. Especially in sometimes when you're missing, you get beat up in transition, and we took care of that too, and then got them in the half court, and like I said, kept them out of our paint, kept them from our rim.
Again, the Cavs will be in Miami playing the Heat tonight, back-to-back. They'll be home to play the Hawks a little later in the show. Ethan Sands will join us, and we'll talk a little bit more about that Cavs game as they get ready for the Heat without Darius Garland. The Guardians traded Josh Naylor in the offseason, was in the final year of his contract. That was part of it. Andre Knott, Guardians reporter, on the effect that Josh being traded could have on his younger brother, Bo Naylor, Guardians starting catcher.
You were one of the first to say that Bo Naylor will benefit from not having Josh here just because of the big brother
pressure syndrome. Yeah, I think that's big. And I think the other thing is that because Josh is Josh. Nobody hates him.
No.
But he's a big
dominating personality.
This is a big year for Bo.
Huge.
I agree.
Huge. Aaron, you're on it. You're on it. It is a big year.
You know what?
He's got to hit. He's got to hit 250 and the manager's right. It's hard to be a great catcher early on, but you got to hit at least 250.
Certainly has the tools to do it. You took a step back relative to the average, and the concerning part of it is the OPS. OPS is on-base percentage plus slugging. 750 is roughly average for a major league hitter. For a catcher, you want it in the 700s, 725. And he has the tools to do it, but last year, 201, 13 homers, 39 runs batted in. OPS was down to 614. You see, it was over 800. Fewer at-bats, fewer games in 2023. Naylor played 123 games last year. He did throw out about 21% of potential base stealers. That's right around league average. His defense has been pretty good for a young catcher. But in this lineup, with this team, I agree wholeheartedly. They need to hit They need him to hit about 250, and if he hits 15 homers, they're getting everything they want from that catcher position. Time for us to take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we're talking Kirk Cousins with Josh Kendall, Falcons beat reporter for the Athletic. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Are you ready? The Ohio Lottery is about to unleash 50 new millionaires on Ohio. Want a chance to become one? Play VIP Millions. With 50 $1 million winning tickets, it's your best chance to win $1 million ever.
Sports for CLE continues. We continue talking quarterbacks. This is from the Bleacher Report. Top scheme fits for quarterbacks who will potentially be in the 2025 offseason carousel. And they say Kirk Cousins of the Falcons with Browns. 36-year-old should have a few solid seasons left in him, particularly now he's another year removed from a ruptured Achilles tendon. Two of Cousins' best seasons came in 2018 and 2019 under the direction of then offensive coordinator Kevin Stefanski, who is now the head coach of the Browns. Let's welcome in Josh Kendall, Falcons beat reporter for The Athletic. Josh, you saw Kirk Cousins. Couple of questions. What did you think with him? And did you think he was completely healthy?
I wish was/is Kirk Cousins healthy was a simple question to answer. But I'm afraid you have to dig into the nuance. Yes, he's healthy. During training camp, we watched Kirk Cousins scramble, move out of the pocket. I can distinctly remember watching him sprint, by Kirk Cousins standard sprint after a guy who, intercepted a pass 75 yards, looked just fine. We also then saw what it looked like in game situations for the Falcons. I still continue to believe that his statuesqueness in games was more a result of sort of mental and not fatigue, but getting yourself mentally back into the game, which we see from guys with injuries, especially, that position is especially a mental drain. I think he was rusty more than unhealthy. I also think the Falcons were clearly, as a coaching staff, hesitant to test it very much for fear, perhaps, that the worst might happen. I think Kirk Cousins' Achilles is healthy. That does not mean that at this point in his career, he won't tire more quickly. His production won't fall off in the back half of the season like we saw last year. It doesn't mean it will. It's just sort of an unanswered question at this point.
When he looked right, did he look like the Kirk Cousins you expected when the Falcons signed him to a big free agent offer?
Yeah, he did. I mean, I think the thing about Kirk Cousins, and the reason I think that there's a market for Kirk Cousins, is you can see whatever you want to see in Kirk Cousins' 2024 experience. Through week 9, so right at the midpoint of the season, Kirk was top 10 in the league in quarterback efficiency, tied for 4th in passing touchdowns. The Falcons were 6-3, led the NFC South by 2 games, and everybody in Atlanta was crowing, literally saying, this is exactly who we thought we were going to get. You guys see who we thought we were going to get. He was and is beloved by his teammates. They were all saying, he makes this whole thing go. So if you're Kevin Stefanski and the Browns or anybody, and you want to believe in Kirk Cousins, you can look at that and believe. Then, starting week 10, Kirk hits a slide that nobody can still explain, really. 5 games in which he throws 9 interceptions, 1 touchdown pass. The Falcons lose 4 of those 5, lose the division lead, never get it back. And everybody was wondering what in the world happened to Kirk Cousins. Like I said, Raheem Morris says, we don't really know. Kirk Cousins says, I can't really explain it. But it just got to the point the Falcons felt they had to make a change. Michael Penix played well enough that they've made clear they're not going back to Kirk Cousins, which lands us here.
Do you believe in the Falcons have come out and said they're perfectly happy with him being backup, QB number 2 to Penix. He has a no trade.
Whatever.
He has a no trade, so he can force his way out of there. Do you think that's what ends up happening? Do you think they end up cutting him and kind of ripping the Band-Aid off, so to speak?
Yes, I think that I don't think that Kirk Cousins is going to be on this team. I think when the Falcons said we're perfectly comfortable with him being the backup quarterback in 2024, what they meant was, if you want Kirk Cousins, you better come trade for him. You know, don't expect us to just release him and give him to you guys. You're going to have to give us something if you really want Kirk Cousins. Whether the league believes them or not, I don't know. I continue to believe that there will be a trade market for Kirk, because I think it behooves, if you do want Kirk Cousins, again, let's use Cleveland as our example today. If you're the Browns and you want Kirk Cousins and you can get him for a 6th-round pick, I mean, I think that's the trade compensation we're talking about. We're essentially talking about enough here for the Falcons to save face and save a little bit of money on the dead cap hit, which they would in a trade versus a cut scenario. So I think if you're the Browns, you can absolutely talk yourself into, let's make it a trade so that we know we've got Kirk. We don't have to go through the whole free agent thing. We're not giving up anything, but we'll see. If push comes to shove, I do think that the Falcons will release Kirk Cousins, because I don't think he wants to play as a backup. I could be wrong. The week he was benched, I know he didn't think, he didn't sound like a guy who was going to be happy returning as a backup, but things change. He is at more toward the end of his career. His in-laws live in Atlanta. They made a big deal about being ready to, settle down here. They like it here. Maybe he settles in, but I doubt it. I expect Kirk Cousins to play somewhere else.
When you look at what he did well, and you mentioned he's kind of statuesque, did the Falcons try to play to what he does well or did well as a quarterback enough?
No. Falcons ran virtually no play action, which is what we had seen Kirk excel in the last 2-3 years. One of the reasons that he really developed into a guy that a lot of people thought was playing the best football of his career. They did almost none of that. I think they threw historically low numbers in terms of out of the pocket, just in rolling him out. So they absolutely did not. They didn't make things easier on him scheme wise. They put him in the pistol, snapped him the ball, said take a couple steps back and figure it out. Whether or not they did that because they just didn't think he could move, that they wouldn't say that. They wouldn't say one way or the other really. They said it's working well enough the first half of the season. We don't know why it wouldn't work in the second half of the season, but even when it started not working, they really didn't try anything else. So you'd have to give Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson truth serum to get the real answer. But no, they did not put him in a position to give him the best possibility of success.
All right, as a guy who saw him play, and as you mentioned, you saw him play really well for 9 games in not very well second half of the season. Does he have something left? If you were going to take a guess, does he have a couple of years left? Does he have a year left where he's Kirk Cousins, the guy that, took teams to the playoffs at least?
I don't know, because I don't know if he can be that guy for an entire season because of the injury and the age. We just don't know. I think he and Aaron Rodgers are both in that uncharted territories of a quarterback their age coming back from an Achilles tear. Do I think Kirk Cousins has something left? Absolutely. I think Kirk Cousins is a great teammate. I think Kirk Cousins is a great voice in the locker room. It's a real value in the quarterback room. So I think Kirk Cousins coming into a situation where he's a bridge quarterback and he knows he's a bridge quarterback. Atlanta brought him in as a bridge quarterback, but told him he was the guy. So I think in a bridge situation, he absolutely has enough left to have some real value in the NFL.
Josh Kendall, a Falcons beat reporter from The Athletic. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
Josh Kendall, Falcons beat reporter, telling us what he saw from Kirk Cousins and that the Falcons didn't really play to his strengths in the play-action game. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. We continue talking Browns. We continue talking quarterbacks. As straight ahead, Spencer German from the Browns on SI. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Well, good morning. After I've had a chance to settle down from an exciting weekend, and I started to watch how all these other teams are making moves to become competitive heading into the next season after the Super Bowl. I was just wondering how you guys feel about that and what the Browns plan to do to help their fans become optimistic again about next year. I know my answer to that. To be continued. Take care.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, the Cleveland Browns on SI, and the Locked On Browns podcast. Spencer, it has to be a concern. Fans are probably as down on this after the 3-14 as they have been. A quarterback that is competent sure corrects a lot of ills.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's the answer that the caller was alluding to there as well. But yeah, I do think if you find the right quarterback, if you make that selection, or whether it's free agency or whatever, that solves a lot of your problems. Washington is a good example of that. Granted, not an apples to apples comparison because they started all over with a lot of change. New owner, new head coach, new GM, all of it sort of starting from scratch, if you will. But the biggest part of that is having a group that came in and identified the right quarterback, and they certainly feel like they have the sky's the limit for their franchise moving forward because they got that guy. So yeah, and I do think like the Browns seem really honed in on this class. Andrew Berry's talked about some of that a little bit already. And, Kevin Stefanski's making appearances at the Senior Bowl. So it certainly feels like the Browns are trying to do everything in their power to find that guy, identify that guy. But yeah, I would say like if you're looking for that big splash that turns the franchise around, or the teams that played this weekend that you're looking and saying like, man, these teams just did these things and all of a sudden they're in the conference championship games. Quarterback, I think, fixes a lot of that for you. If it's kind of an instantaneous injection into your team if you identify the right person.
Yeah, if you get better quarterback play, your defense probably has the ability to be, again, top 10 in the league.
Yeah.
All right, let's take. You wrote a couple of articles. You alluded to one of them. What do you think of Kevin Stefanski being present at the Senior Bowl? What do you think it says?
Yeah, this is probably one of the most notable parts of the Browns offseason to this point, or one of the most notable stories to the Browns offseason to this point. Just the fact that Kevin Stefanski, who hasn't really been somebody who's gone to these offseason events, the Senior Bowl most notably, very often, and this time he's making a concerted effort to be there. To me, this feels like a pivot to, okay, we tried making things work with the quarterback that was here when we got here with Baker Mayfield. Didn't quite work out. We tried to go swing big and get the franchise quarterback that was available via trade. Didn't work out. The one thing they haven't tried to this point is pairing this coach that they obviously 5 years ago hired to be the head coach because they felt like he, could turn the franchise around, and he brought a lot to the table, and he was a great offensive mind. And let's make sure he has a chance to find his quarterback that can do the things that he's going to be expected to do and run his offense efficiently. So like this is pretty telling to me. Like, I don't know if it's Kevin Stefanski like calling all the shots on this, but it certainly feels like he is going to have more power than maybe ever with getting a chance to select his quarterback, give insight into which quarterbacks he likes and which ones he thinks will be the best fit for his offense. And so to me, that was been such a telling thing about this week, seeing him present, seeing him involved in the process. And it also sort of points to this idea that they are trying to hone in on the quarterback position, potentially with the number 2 overall pick. Obviously that could change, but given, that he's showing up to these things and seems involved in the process. It certainly feels like that is where their heads are at least right now in January, that they're trying to identify somebody through the draft that they think is going to work for them.
Yeah, the other thing is that it's not just the quarterback. I think it's his offensive system. So who can we get that can be a left tackle? What do we need to add to a receiver? Which of the running? Give me what I like is I think the offense needs an injection of playmakers. So does that mean I think Kevin Stefanski is going to have a little bit more voice in it, which if he's there, he should. The other thing, and we touched on this in our news segment at the top of the hour. Andrew Berry said he's not worried about the Dion Sanders, nixing Shedeur coming to Cleveland, which I'm the one that I'm one of the guys that's you better be concerned about this. Now there are a couple of dots to connect here. Pat Shurmur, who knows Kevin Stefanski was his offensive coordinator at Colorado, being Shedeur's. So there's a relationship there. Additionally, Dion knows Bill Musgrave, who was just elevated to quarterback coach, played with him in San Francisco. So those, and again, I'm not saying Shedeur is the guy. Those are certainly things that are going to make Dion more comfortable with what would be the offensive staff. I'm not saying they're taking Shedeur. You have to be aware of that. And the other thing is, if Dion's going to put that hammer down, it isn't going to be until after the combine, closer to the draft, because otherwise Shedeur becomes a problem for guys that are looking at quarterbacks.
Yeah, the Bill Musgrave's connection is a good one that I hadn't, I guess, connected the dots on yet. So that's a good, obviously, observation by you, Dave. But all that stuff matters. Like this league is very much about relationships. And yeah, maybe at some point there's a conversation had where Dion's like, Cleveland is not on the list of teams that we would let Shedeur play for, and it becomes a problem. But to me, like Barry saying this now and making it very clear, like I don't envision that being an issue. We know they met with him at the Shrine Bowl last week on Friday, I believe it was, along with a handful of other teams that are at the top of the draft there. And so I would imagine those were conversations that they had, and they got some of that out of the way now. So as things, and again, obviously it's subject to change, the next several months, maybe something different happens. Maybe Dion speaks up, who knows? But, given that they've had those conversations, I think it's a promising comment from Barry that he doesn't seem very concerned with that right now, and that they are going about this process kind of clear-headed and looking into, whether or not they think these guys are a fit on the field, rather than are they a fit because of their personality or something else that's kind of going on behind the scenes. And I'm with you. Like I've brought that up. Like if maybe the Browns like Shedeur, but if his dad raises a stink about not wanting to come to Cleveland, then he can't be your pick anyway. Because the last thing the Browns need is like another situation at quarterback that's just, as soon as something goes wrong, he's forcing his way out or whatever. But if they feel comfortable and they've touched base with his camp and they, aren't worried about that, then that's a huge step towards knowing that door is still open for you. You can still explore drafting him at number 2 if that's the route that they end up wanting to go.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Again, if they want to draft him, if they identify him as a guy that they think can run this system, and I hope they get the ability to do that. All right, you also wrote an article, 3 must-sign free agents for the Browns. Number 1, you got Nick Chubb, running back. Number 2, Devin Bush, and number 3, a tackle, Jermaine Ifedi. Honorable mention, Winston Reed and Jordan Akins. But let's deal with Ifedi. That we still don't know what DeJuan Jones is, and that's a problem. You've got really good feedback when he was healthy. Bill Callahan was here, and you ran, the offense before you changed it. He was pretty good as a rookie. Last year, not as good. He was hurt. That's a problem. You don't know what you have in a young guy who had a promising rookie year.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with DeJuan Jones is just how healthy is he going to be? The injuries at this point have piled up in his first 2 seasons. Is he somebody that you're going to be able to rely on, or is he going to continue to get injured? So, I love the idea of as long as he's healthy, and he should be for the start of the season, he's your left tackle, and you see how it goes. The reason I put Ifedi on that list isn't because I think like that's a move that's going to turn a lot of heads or get people excited, but I thought Ifedi late in the season, they always say you can kind of tell how a lineman's doing if you're not hearing their name called very often. I didn't hear his name called very often. I thought he kind of held his own. And it's not that I expect he's going to be the starting left tackle for this team for years to come, or that they shouldn't still go draft the tackle or, look to add at that position because they need that. That's a massive hole that they need to fill if they aren't going to go with DeJuan Jones or they're worried about DeJuan Jones. But given how the last couple of years have gone on the offensive line, it's never a bad idea to have a lot of depth at that position or just those positions in general up front. And so I thought it was worth kind of putting his name on there as somebody to resign. But yeah, I do think right now there could be a logical thought process behind this of let's get DeJuan Jones back healthy. He's our left tackle next year. And that saves you from maybe having to feeling like you have to draft the tackle, at number 2 or at a specific spot. I'm sure they still will draft some linemen, but that might kind of fill a hole, at least in the short term. If there's some injury concerns that keep piling up for DeJuan Jones, that saves you some draft capital that you can use on something else. So yeah, I'm at least intrigued by the idea of DeJuan Jones being the left tackle next year, as long as he can get back healthy, and maybe not having to make that as high of a priority as it seems like it might be, because we know at this point Jedrick Wills is very unlikely to be coming back for this team.
Yeah, and Devin Bush is a guy it kind of figured in similar. We have no idea with JOK, and Devin Bush was competent at this point in time. Competent defenders are good.
Yeah, I think I wrote in there, I can't remember off the top of my head what the stat was, but I think PFF had him graded as like the highest graded linebacker outside of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who we know obviously is hurt or ended the season hurt. And then like that, but he was obviously like he was ahead of Jordan Hicks in terms of their grading. So, and PFF isn't, always you put stock in it, but it's not the end all be all for a player. But I thought Devin Bush held his own. He was fine. I don't think he was the first round draft pick he was with Pittsburgh his first year in the league, but I thought he was solid. I thought he was good. And the other part of that is he's a special teamer that they can use. And I think he found a nice place on the special teams units as well. So yeah, I thought those three made sense. It's a weird year for the Browns because I don't know that you're looking at this roster and guys that are free agents being like, oh man, they really got to bring back that guy. The only one of those that exists, I think, is Nick Chubb. I think he's the one that's like, bring him back. It's easy PR for the team. If there's anything left in the tank, he could still be a great player for you. And we know they're going back to Stefanski's offense that he thrived in so well. So yeah, like that's the only one. Other than that, I there's a lot of guys that you can kind of take or leave. And I think that the solutions or answers to some of these holes they have to fill are going to have to come via the draft and via free agency, trying to sort of work through some different ideas on in terms of the roster construction.
Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Browns on SI, and the Locked On Browns podcast, and I are going to step aside. When we return, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, the Cleveland Browns on SI, and the Locked On Browns podcast. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, this is Mike from West Virginia. I wanted to talk about Will Howard. Will Howard's 6'4", 235 pounds. He's really mobile for his size. He's strong. All his teammates like him. He's got an adequate arm that can make all the throws. when you watch him through this college football playoff run, he was throwing in some tight windows, and the thing I liked about him is when his reads wasn't there and he had to improvise, he kept his eyes down the field, and when it looked like there was a threat to run, he's still going through his progressions and finding guys that are wide open. So interested to see what your guys' take is on that. Love the show. Take care, Dave, and God bless.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Spencer, we had to cut that down for time's sake. He mentioned Ben Roethlisberger in that as well, and it's kind of interesting. I hadn't thought of it in terms of that. If he's there, third round, I'd be intrigued. I don't know that I would, because they're drafting so high. I don't know that I'd take him second round. Will Howard in the third round? I'm intrigued.
Yeah, it's funny he says that because I think Ben Roethlisberger when he came into the league was like 6'5", 240. So like Will Howard is like 5 pounds less than that. So the comp there is interesting. The comp there is very intriguing in that way. And I'm somebody who, in following Ohio State's run to the national championship and following Ohio State this whole season, I have enjoyed watching sort of the development of Will Howard in that playoff run. He was brilliant. The biggest question I have is how much of that was the talent around him, who he was playing with, and how much of that was him. Now, I think some of his decision-making got better. He showed a lot of poise. Well, I mean, one thing I do not deny with him that I do think will translate to the NFL and is a quality that you want in your quarterback is like he does have sort of that short-term memory, that ability to bounce back and not like repeat the same mistakes. Like he doesn't let those things sort of perpetuate. Like he makes a bad play, he makes an interception, he comes back out, he'll lead you on a touchdown drive. So his poise, his moxie, there's some of that there. And that's the one quality that I feel really strong in saying is something that will translate and makes him, somebody that teams will consider and should consider drafting. It's the throwing the football and reading defenses stuff that I still have some questions about. Because again, it's one thing to be thrown to guys when you have Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and some of these other great receivers. It's another when you're, trying to push the ball downfield, tighter coverages, read a defense at the NFL level when things are a little bit faster as well. He threw the ball behind the line of scrimmage a lot in college too. So there's still some questions I have, and maybe some of those things can get answered throughout the pre-draft process. I am curious to see rather how his stock continues to rise from the playoff to the combine to his pro day to the draft. I did hear somebody report earlier today that they think, or they've been hearing that like somebody like Jalen Milroe could be a later first round pick. So if that's the case, like I almost wonder where that means Will Howard ends up when this is all said and done. Like we're sitting here saying like, yeah, third round, Browns have 2 picks. Why not use one of them on a guy like Will Howard if you don't take a quarterback at 2? But I'm kind of curious to see if after this conversation with around Will Howard continues, if his stock gets high enough that he maybe is a second round pick, and that's going to be where you had to select him if you want him as a player.
All right. So another position I think the Browns need to upgrade is wide receiver. A wide receiver who has looked pretty impressive Senior Bowl practices. Miami's Xavier Restrepo. Trevor Sikkema from PFF, friend of the show, what he sees when he looks at Restrepo.
Everybody loves the one-on-one wide receiver and DB drills that we have at the Senior Bowl every single year. And I'm going to tell you a player that you have to have your eye on every single time he steps up to the line. Miami wide receiver, Xavier Restrepo. This dude's a stud. 5th-year guy, so he's got that experience to him. Over 2,300 yards over the last 2 years. Not the biggest guy in the world, 5'10", about 195 pounds, but he is a savant when it comes to how he runs his routes. 93rd percentile in separation scores against all types of coverages. 89th percentile separation scores against single coverages alone. Incredibly high numbers. That's what that drill is all about. So no matter who he is going up against, I'm going to give Xavier Restrepo the advantage, and I think he's going to be a big-time fan favorite when the week is over.
Yeah, look, certainly, not the most heralded recruit as a wide receiver to ever show up in Coral Gables. I mean, you think of names like Michael Irvin, you think of names like Andre Johnson, Santana Moss, but it is Xavier Restrepo who leaves Miami as the career leader in receptions and receiving yards.
And he's a guy that's projected mid-second round, third round. So, again, it's intriguing. He's a guy that Cam Ward, those numbers, They're from Cam Ward.
Yeah. No, I'm really intrigued by Xavier Restrepo. He had a phenomenal season, as they said in the clip there. Leads Miami as the all-time leading receiver. And a guy that we didn't necessarily know too much about, I don't think. Like, this year was his kind of come up, if you will, because Cam Ward was there throwing the football a lot. But yeah, he's brilliant. And given his sort of size, I kind of feel like he would be deadly as a slot guy at the NFL level that you can kind of do some different stuff with, get open in different parts of the field than maybe you can on the outside. I do think one thing that's interesting with the Browns, like if they want somebody like Restrepo, if they want somebody in the second round, and they feel like they're going to get taken if that's where Restrepo were to go, and it's like late second round, because of where they pick, like having that early first, that early second round pick, they pick 33rd overall in the second round, having that late or that early third round pick that's their own, that gives you an opportunity where like you can get back up into the second round pretty easily, and teams only have to drop back, not quite as far as they would if they're going late third round. So I think like there's some value in the Browns being kind of where they're at, obviously, because you're picking earlier, but that allows them to, move around the board differently and navigate some things that there's a player potentially like Restrepo that they like and they want to go get. They'll have a chance to do that just based off of like where they pick and where he's kind of projected to potentially go.
All right, before we go to break, you wrote an article, star running back prospect that is a perfect fit for the Browns. Take us through that, who it is and what you like about him.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, because every time I get the chance to talk about this, I like light up about it. I think Dion Judkins is like the perfect prototype for what the Browns need as a running back to sort of split some time probably with Nick Chubb when he gets back from another season-ending injury, or Jerome Ford, and just, sort of balance back out the team that they used to be that had this great 1-2 punch out of the backfield. And the player he reminds me of, as I wrote about in this piece, is Kareem Hunt. Like, I was sitting there watching him last Monday against Notre Dame run with just this physical authority. And that's been the way he's played all year. And it kind of took me throughout this playoff run to really pick up on it and be like, you know what, that reminds me of Kareem Hunt. And then you watch Kareem Hunt this past weekend in the AFC Championship game, and he's still bringing that physicality to his game. He does it. It's almost like a perfect mirror image to each other. And so I just feel like, given how people felt about Kareem Hunt, they loved him here in Cleveland, partially because he was from here, but also just because of the type of player that he was and the physicality that he brought to the game. He had that kind of blue collar mentality about him. And Quinshawn sort of feels like he has a similar feel to him, and the style of play is a good fit. Cleveland fans will eat it up. And frankly, like, I think running back is a need that this team has to emphasize. I think it's probably right there with like wide receiver, maybe even higher than wide receiver in terms of a need that this team has and potentially should address in the draft. Just because, again, if you're going back to Stefanski's offense, you want a good running back, even if it's a sort of by committee approach that will allow you to, utilize that run game as a strength, and then build off of that by doing the play action stuff that they like to do. So I just think Quinshawn's a tremendous player. He averaged like over 3 yards a carry after contact, and he seems like a perfect fit for this Browns backfield to kind of give you a new lead tailback that's young and can be here for a while. And however he splits those carries or divvies things up between Nick Chubb, assuming Nick Chubb is back, and Jerome Ford, I think it still just makes sense for them to sort of pivot to a younger player and somebody who has a lot of talent. The nice thing is this class is so deep, you could get somebody like Dion Judkins in the second or third round, and I don't think it's going to be that far-fetched, because I'm kind of only projecting like one guy goes in the first round, but I think there's going to be a run second, third round on a lot of these running backs, and so the Browns may find themselves in a position to draft somebody like Dion Judkins.
Spencer German and I are going to step aside, take one more timeout. Other side of the break, talk a little bit about the Browns' offensive line. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us. Full Court Action is a half-hour devoted exclusively to men's and women's basketball from across the Mid-American Conference. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Bacon. Join me at 6:30 Tuesday nights, and we'll meet the coaches and players from the Mid-American Conference who are making an impact in basketball. Full Court Action will spotlight the top plays and performances from all across the Mid-American Conference, with some historical action as well. Catch Full Court Action Tuesday nights at 6:30 on Rock Entertainment Sports Network. We continue talking Browns with Spencer German from the Locked On Browns podcast. Take a look at this. So it's the Browns' interior offensive line, and they struggled dramatically after switching schemes. So the 2023 PFF run grades: Teller 74.0, Posick 68, Bitonio 60.8. 2024, Teller 61.9, Posick 63.7. Those are Teller's worst since 2019, Posick's worst since 2020, Bitonio a career worst, 59.6. So I guess the question I have, Spencer, was it what they were asking these guys to do, or did these guys just get old? It's got to be, I guess it could be a combination. One has to factor into it more than the other, though.
I wonder if for Bitonio, it's maybe some of the latter, like he's just kind of a player getting into his mid-30s, and he's played that position for a long time. He's been in this league for a long time. He's obviously just got, upgraded to going to the Pro Bowl for a 7th straight time. So still playing at a high level, but maybe just not quite as high as he was early in his career. Because I kind of, I saw the grades there and I was like, I wonder if 60.8 was his lowest before this past year. So that kind of indicates like maybe there's a little bit of a step back year by year for him. But I think just in general, like you go back and listen to what players were saying in the locker room after the game, or after the season rather, and talking about, it was Jack Conklin who made the comment about how, you build around one person, one player, it doesn't work. You got to create your own identity and what works for us. And we know what that was. Like what worked for them was that Kevin Stefanski outside zone play action offense. And so going back to that is obviously, it feels like that's the priority this offseason. It seems like that's what they're trying to do. And that's probably for the best for this group. Like you come in, you establish for several years that you have this really good strength up front on the offensive line. And, you kind of ingrain in them certain philosophies, certain things that you want to do. Bill Callahan being at the front of that as the former O-line coach. And then you just pivot to, well, now we're doing this different offense where the quarterback likes to improvise more and we're going to do RPO stuff and it's just not going to be the same. And guys throughout the season kept saying like, you start to pass so much and that becomes the focal point. And then you try to go back to running the football and you're just not really used to doing that anymore. And so it all just didn't work. It all just didn't mesh together. And so, yeah, I think there's certainly something to be said for the change in system, the change in scheme, having a major impact on that group as a whole, regressing this past season. And that's why I do think like getting back to what Stefanski's offense kind of calls for, those principles and philosophies is going to mean this. I don't know this offensive line necessarily goes back to being as elite as they were a couple years ago, but I do think like it plays more into their strengths and you have a better chance of being successful with that group if you make that call and you go back to it, because last year just did not work.
All right, we'll go through this one pretty quickly, and then we got one more thing with a potential trade package before I let you go. But bargain free agents who could solve roster issues. This is from the Bleacher Report. And for the Browns, they say Nick Chubb averaged 3.3 yards per carry last season, never appeared to get back to full strength before being shut down with a broken foot. Poor metrics, injury concerns. He'll likely get a incentive-laden deal, which we've said. Wide receiver, this one's intriguing. Mike Williams, few receivers possess combination of speed, size, ball tracking abilities that Williams brings to the table. Underwhelming 2024 season, managed to post a respectable 14.2 yards per carry, just 1.3 off of his career best. And he was playing for the Steelers, so they didn't use him a ton. Mike Williams didn't get a ton of snaps. I'm intrigued. I don't know. He might be well past his prime. We've talked about Chubb. If you bring Chubb back on an incentive-laden deal, I don't see the downside to it.
Yeah, I think ultimately they'll get something done with Chubb in the nature that you're talking about, like incentive-laden, him sort of agreeing to a hometown discount because he loves it in Cleveland and he's talked about wanting to finish his career here. And I think those two sides will work something out. I am intrigued by Mike Williams. I mean, listen, if the Browns are going to kind of have to figure out what are we going to prioritize in free agency, what are we going to prioritize in the draft, and one will sort of set the tone for the other. If they decide like, we don't want to have to use a pick on a wide receiver because maybe because they feel like they haven't been able to develop those guys. I doubt they're going to admit that, but from the outside looking in, it certainly looks that way, given the guys they've drafted and, haven't really panned out. But if they feel like maybe we need to save picks on other needs that we have, quarterback, running back, offensive line, defensive line, maybe linebacker, we'd rather prioritize those things in the draft, or some of those things in the draft, and go get a wide receiver in free agency or via trade. I could see that being something that they do. And the idea of Mike Williams, who I do agree is probably past his prime at this point, but could still be a contributor. The nice thing for the Browns, though, is I think they found their number one. I think Jerry Jeudy proved he can be that number one guy. And you're now just looking for complementary pieces to surround him with. It'd be nice if you could get a rookie, and maybe they still will, especially in one of those earlier rounds. But I do like the idea of Mike Williams being added into the mix there for sure.
All right, so this is also from the Bleacher Report. Potential trade packages for the Titans' number 1 overall pick. They say the Browns trade the number 2 pick and both of their 2025 third-round picks for the number 1 pick. And they rationalize it with considering how horribly wrong things have gone with Deshaun Watson. Might be desperate enough to make the move. Second pick, they're already positioned to be guaranteed one of the 2 quarterbacks. Swapping with the Titans would ensure they could get their preferred guy. I don't like that. I don't like trading 2. If there isn't a guy, if there was a Joe Burrow in this draft, okay. There's not a Joe Burrow. Yeah. There's not a Jaden Daniels. There's not, we've already heard independent people say, Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl, these guys probably aren't getting picked, being Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, ahead of Bo Nix, who was the 6th. Bo Nix or Michael Penix. So the top 6 means they're 7th from, the quarterback class last year. I would not trade both third-round picks to get up to 1.
Yeah, and I think the other part of this too, Dave, is just the Browns are sort of in. Andrew Perry wouldn't define it this way, but they sort of are in like a situation of playing catch up a little bit because they haven't had the first-round picks the last 3 years. Where the more players you draft, the more bites at the apple you get, the better it could pan out for you because you're getting more premium players in those first 2 days than you are in the later rounds. And so, I think it makes more sense for the Browns, even if they don't get the quarterback they want or they decide, hey, our guy got taken, we're going to take something else. I think that's a better situation to be in and know that you can still make more picks in the first 2 days than just getting that quarterback and thinking that's going to save you, especially in a class that we know has been talked about as not being that great of a class. So it's an interesting spot to be in. I don't think the Browns will do that. And I'm with you where I just, I think you got to try to, this year's class has to be about drafting and developing as many players as possible. Cause you got to start supplementing this roster in some key areas as guys get older, as guys become too expensive. You can't pay everybody. And you sort of sort through those things. That's been what's lacking from Andrew Perry and the staff the last couple of years. And so this draft is pivotal in kind of getting back on track with that.
Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, as well as Cleveland Browns on SI and the Lockdown Browns podcast. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Spencer.
Of course. Appreciate it, Dave. Always a pleasure. Spencer
German, make sure you check him out at 92.3 The Fan. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We turn our attention to the Cavs straight ahead on Sports4CLE.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Are you ready? The Ohio Lottery is about to unleash 50 new millionaires on Ohio. Want a chance to become one? Play VIP Millions. With 50 $1 million winning tickets, it's your best chance to win $1 million ever.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We turn our attention to the Cavaliers on Sports4CLE, getting ready to play a game in Miami in a couple hours, and it'll be a back-to-back as they'll have the Hawks at home. Let's welcome in Ethan Sands, Cavs beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Ethan, you wrote a recent article. Take us through it. Donovan Mitchell in refusing to let fatigue dictate the season.
I mean, this is the time of year when everybody's tired. Everybody's trying to get into the All-Star break, trying to get, well, not Donovan Mitchell in this case, but get a weekend off, get a week off where they can just reset, recalibrate. And Jared Allen talked about it after a couple of games ago about how the one day off that they got was enough to help them rejuvenate against the Detroit Pistons. But Donovan Mitchell specifically was talking about how in that game he had to kind of tap into a different level because he came in a little bit fatigued. I believe he missed 7 straight shots after making the first 8 points for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And that's not who Donovan Mitchell is. And it was clearly attached to some level of fatigue, exhaustion even, just because of how much he's played throughout this season, how much he's had to give and earn for this team, especially as the leader. And then you talk about coming into the second half, playing the way he did, and he talked about it being just defeating fatigue, which is something that I know a lot of different players are trying to do this season. And it's something that this Cavs team is going to need to do, especially going forward. And Donovan also mentioned how over the last couple of games, they've started to ramp him up into the process of getting ready for playoff caliber games, playoff minutes, where he's played over 30 minutes in 4 of his last 6 games. And we know he's averaging a career low 31 minutes a game. So that's something to keep an eye on as the Cavs not only go into the All-Star break, but also get ready for the playoffs in the second half of the season.
Take a look at Darius Garland and what he is averaging over the last 10 games. Over 26 points. He's averaging 2.3 rebounds, over 7 assists, a steal, shooting 51% from the field, 42% if you round it up from three-point range. You also wrote an article on Garland. Take us through that and kind of what your thoughts are on Garland.
Yeah, we've talked about it a couple of times because Kenny Atkinson continues to bring it up. This is an all-star caliber season from Darius, but it's also the beginning of a conversation that I think we need to have around the NBA about where Darius Garland's career can go and the trajectory that he's on. Kenny Atkinson, who coached in Golden State for 3 years and coached alongside Steve Kerr, coaching Stephen Curry during their championship run, he has compared Stephen Curry and Darius Garland multiple occasions this season. So I wrote about the comparison, the trajectory, the injury history comparison, but also where Darius Garland is in his career. Just his 6th season in the NBA, and he has the opportunity to do exactly what Steph did in his 6th season, win an NBA championship if the Cavs continue to play how they're playing. But it's not necessarily comparing the two players and saying that Darius Garland is the next Steph Curry, because Steph Curry, as we know, is a generational talent. We're saying that Darius Garland is a relatable player, 6'1" guard who has craftiness, who's worked his way up through the NBA. He was once regarded as the worst player in the NBA statistically, and now is rising up the ranks into someone that is not only respected by his teammates, but also players, coaches, and fans around the league. So you talk about being in a season where he's shooting the best field goal percentage, best three-point percentage, and matching his points per game at this point in the season as he had last year. And that's only going up. He's had games this season or this last month that he scored 40 points, 39 points. It's been a masterclass of just his creativity, his passing, his scoring acumen, and all these different things. So I definitely think Darius Garland, when it comes to the next faces of the NBA, he's someone you should keep an eye on, especially because of his relatability and how Stephen Curry could pass him the torch.
All right, so Garland getting a night off tonight, gonna rest in Miami. It's back-to-back, Miami on the road, then the Hawks at home. Cavs have lost twice to the Heat, or rather twice to Atlanta, once to the Heat. So 3 of their 9 losses are to the teams that they're playing back-to-back tonight and tomorrow. What are you paying attention to in these 2 games?
I mean, coming into this game, Dave, we understand that Miami, the Miami flu is a real thing. They've lost 16, they're 16-51 all time when traveling to Miami, the Cleveland Cavaliers are. So you understand the discrepancy and the disparity of that. And I think when you talk about these next 2 games, you also have to mention, obviously you say Darius Garland is out, but they're also going to be without Dean Wade and Isaac Okoro, who likely will be out until the All-Star break has wrapped up. Karis LeVert is probably the most likely to return before the break, but he's also out as well. So you're without 3 people that you can give the ball to on the offensive end, but also 3 players that are the top tier defensive players for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So that's basically what I'm going to continue to watch and monitor over these next 2 games when it comes to how the Cavs played against the Detroit Pistons, how they held a team under 100 points for just the 5th time this season. Being able to carry over that performance into the next 2 games is extremely important for this team. But the other thing that I'm going to mention when it comes to the Atlanta Hawks is Jalen Johnson, a guy who hurt them in their first 2 matchups. He is out for the remainder of the season with a torn labrum for the Atlanta Hawks. And that's something to notice when you talk about how he's going to have, or how the Cavs are going to have to match up differently. And I think these next 2 games, because Evan Mobley has just returned from an injury, it's going to be just his 3rd game back tonight after missing 4 games with his calf strain, that you see Kenny continue to reacclimate him into the offense. And against a guy like Bam Adebayo, Khalil Ware, and then also you talk about the Atlanta Hawks and what they have going on in the interior, this is definitely a stretch of games where you could see Evan Mobley regain his confidence and get back on the saddle when it comes to this season and when it comes back to his offensive production that he had earlier in the year. We understand his defense is always going to be there, but his offensive level can take the ceiling of the Cavs to the next level, and it will determine where they end up in the playoffs and how their season ends.
Ethan Sands, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Ethan.
Thank you for having me.
Ethan Sands, make sure you check him out. Always really good Cavs coverage. He is the Cavs beat reporter for Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.